Hello, hello, hello. Happy Wednesday, everyone. What is today? All Saints Day after Halloween. Hope everyone had a great Halloween. For those that celebrate it. Oh, how's everyone doing? I actually don't have much to say today, so we'll just get on with it. Again, thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Sterling, for all the news posting in there. Good morning, PMG. I mean, it's looking like it was more of a short-term bottom. I said we were at the end of the Elliott wave count. We had some daily cycles and weekly cycles at the bottom. Now, intermediate, since there's a sell signal, I'm going to be watching for the next rollover play, but we're going into a seasonal upward bias. So, yeah, we could have a short term bottom in place. That's what I've been watching. From my perspective now, it's trailing any longs from that were established in the last couple days. Uh, so that's about where that sits. Where else do we sit? Good morning, Jacob. We can take a look at silver. Good morning, Tony. Good morning, Anissa. Good morning, Richard. Good morning, Royal Palms. Good morning to people hiding in the background. All right, so we had the mortgage stuff come out. Not much there. ADP numbers. I don't know why people give this so much is weight. It really does not matter in terms of what's going on with the numbers coming out on Friday. But, that was coming in higher than forecast, a little lower than consensus, higher than previous. The global S&P global manufacturing numbers coming out 15 minutes after cash open are more important. The ISM numbers in terms of manufacturing are much more important. Both forecast to be around S&P Global around 50, which is completely neutral, so a slight uptick from previous. ISM still forecast to be in contraction. So, good morning, Options 22. All right, so pay attention, but those aren't going to be the big things today. The big things today is going to be the rate pause. Keep an eye also back to ISM numbers, the manufacturing prices. Just keep an eye on manufacturing prices and if new orders drops substantially, and if prices bounces at all. Just pay attention to those numbers if you're looking to see how the market's going to react. EIA numbers after crude breaking some short-term support yesterday, trying to bounce back today. EIA numbers, but these have been such garbage recently. It's going to be interesting at 9:30. Then the big thing, the interest rate pause today. So it's going to be more what is said. I mean, there's going to be everybody analyzing the red line document right at 1 p.m. Central, but the biggest thing is going to be the press conference to see if Powell says anything new or anything other than, yeah, we're going to still evaluate the stuff. If we need to hike again, we will. Otherwise, we're going to stay steady, but there'll be no cuts in the short term. There, so you can probably just watch the markets while he's talking. But I will have that on in the background. That's where we sit today. Again, not much to talk about. A little bounce in Tesla. Healthcare down today. Mixed in the mega caps. Oil, a little bounce with crude bouncing. The groups, let me just do a quick refresh. Energy, consumer cyclical leading. Consumer defensive and healthcare. So it's a rotation out of the defensive stocks. Healthcare is also a defensive stock so far today, but we'll see how that holds up. Fed watch, there's your pause. They're not going to shock with this at all. And no, then it continues pause through the first cut in June next year. But we'll have to see if that extends out based off what he says today and still in fear mode after bouncing out of the extreme fear. Good morning, Sashi. All right, AMD was a beat, but nothing much going on with AMD yesterday. Not much going on. Kraft Heinz was a miss on revenue, which was very interesting. Kraft Heinz is sort of it did break some key support, but it's sort of getting interesting from a longer term perspective if it can find a more substantial bottoming pattern. After the close, we have PayPal, which is just, it's round tripping to its IPO price. Roku, which is already a disaster, and Qualcomm. But Qualcomm pretty much being the most important out of there. And tomorrow we got Palantir, Shopify, but the big news tomorrow is going to be Apple after the close, which I think could be more substantial than anything this week in terms of market moving. Now, yesterday we got a little retest right after the open. Got the little retest right after the open yesterday, and then found some key support, and then the tick moving up, and the VIX. Let me jump to the VIX. The VIX yesterday down and getting below that 20 mark, starting to excel. Really dropping. Sorry, yesterday was right here, really dropping. Yesterday, all the way down to this 18 area. So I'm always real cautious on this Fed days because generally going in, even though it's the pause fully baked in, it tends to be choppier back and forth. And so we'll see. We've had a nice 2.5 day run up after the low. Remember, this was a %B buy, a little follow through on that, but the first target is the rotation zone, which we stalled out against in the short term. If we break higher, or also on the little downward swing, this little last downward swing between the 24th mini swing high and the low on the 27th, we're right between the 50 and the 62.5% rollover zone. So this pre-market lows are going to be very key for watching from my perspective, this 41.91, 41.90 area. Other than that, if the rally continues, 42.27 is my next target. Then a major target area, 42.43 to 42.48. And then above there is actually back to kiss the 200 and the 87.5 level. Now, in order for me to really target that in the short term, I need that close below 42.27. And that would be taken to the top of the rotation zone, and also the prior breakdown zone from the lows at the beginning of October that were retested on the 24th. So that's going to be a very key area. On any pullbacks, going into, I'm again watching for some choppier trade. I have to assume it's going to be choppier unless we get really strong tick one way or the other, but I'm looking for more reversal stuff. I was actually surprised at this move. I did not know where this came from. I was looking at other stuff at 7:30, and we had everything rally right then, and there wasn't any major report. The ADP numbers came out at 7:15. However, we do not have a double right here, but if we do break below this 41.95, I'll start targeting a bigger pullback, which does not mean new lows. I'll start targeting a bigger pullback, which key area would be 41.70 and then 41.58. Those are the two levels. If we close below 41.58 on a 1 hour basis, then I'll watch for a retest and possibly a stronger bottoming pattern. Remember, I'm watching for some bullish price action. Now, anything can change, but I'm watching for bullish price action into possibly Thanksgiving. Given you still have a situation going on in the Mideast that is the markets are pretty much ignoring now, if something really flares up there, besides the fighting that's already been gone on, that can really change things. But for the time being, not much to talk about right there. NASDAQ, we're still in the channeling flag pattern. Overhead resistance is 14,544 area for me, 14,545. Key support now coming in. Just see, first little level is key support for reversal stuff I'm looking for is about 14,420. We break below that, it's going to be right about 14,380. And if we solidly break the channel lower, then, and these, if we push to new highs, these levels will slightly change, but 14,327, and then on a closing basis, 14,277. To the upside, I'll get back to your question, Sterling. To the upside, very key area is 14,545, which is not just the 50% harmonic from the sell-off, the most recent sell-off. It's also right around the breakdown zone, and then 14,645, especially on a daily closing basis. Why we close above that? My next target, we could pretty we might be able to kiss the 200 again, away again, but I'd be looking for 14,847. Sterling is asking, do we have a 4-hour inverted head and shoulders? That's, yeah. You're better to use these harmonics into the clear path. So you have an advanced clear path right here. Can you see that? Right here? Sorry, it wasn't pointing up. You have an advanced clear path with the end being the 87.5. So that's really the target I'd use in trying to force an inverted head and shoulders in here. If you wanted to trade it, I'd trade it with the flat neckline. And technically, the flat neckline, it's actually would you have to use a slightly down-sloping neckline. Would be here. We'll just put on the targets to see where they come up with. I'd just rather simplify it and use the 87.5, but you're right in that area. And I have to drag this over, by the way, sorry. So it's actually down. Remember, it's where you solidly break the neckline. So look where that puts us. Now, it's roughly the same areas. I mean, there's stop level, you could use about 42.38. First target, 42.56, but I'd be looking at this final area, right around the 87.5. So it's virtually the same thing if you wanted to try to do something with that head and shoulders. Speaking of Apple, I officially moved on from iPhone and got a Google Pixel. Pretty impressed, honestly. Well, thank you for that feedback, Jake. Yeah, that iPhone 15 was what? Oh, it's all about the titanium. Really? Come on. Let's get some new features. Tim Cook's a manufacturing guy, not an innovator. I mean, we've seen that for years. I mean, how many times has the last iPhone's been a rehash of the same gosh darn thing? We already looked at NASDAQ. The Dow, sort of forming a base. If we get above this 33,125, 33,220, and key level is 33,360. All right, that's going to be very key. Key support on the Dow coming in 32,900. We break below 32,900, then I'm targeting 32,815 and 32,713. The Russell, you just got this channeling pattern right now. The Russell's been a mess. Personally, I would not force any trades in the Russell right now because it's in a bigger consolidation pattern. It's in a channeling pattern, and it's not the best thing. From the bullish points of view, I'd be focusing on the S&P or the NASDAQ. From the bearish, I'd be focusing on the Russell first. Sashi moved on to a Samsung Flix 4. So this could be interesting. Thank you for that feedback. I think Apple's going to miss. And this is also late reporting for Apple. So we'll have to see, though. I think the Magnificent 7 is going to start breaking down, especially in this holiday season at some point. We already looked at the VIX trying to roll over. The DAX still has the double technically in play. Coming off a divergence, but no trigger in that yet, so nothing else to talk about there. Still watching to see if it closes above 1520, but that's still lower probabilities. Notes, still not technically invalidated, but I'm not watching a lot until we get to the Fed meeting. Then I'll start watching the notes. A little bounce with some of the release of how they're going to be restructuring or looking at the upcoming issuance of bills and everything. Yield, still inverse the notes, still potential double top in play. That's I should say confirmed but not triggered. My trigger point for this, if it rolls over after the press conference, would be watching, especially on the daily, to make sure it follows through and closes below the rotation zone. You see this day spiking into the rotation zone back on the 11th and closing above it, spiking below it on the 12th and closing well above it. You see, that's why I'm watching. Even if we spike below it, I want to see the close back below it and not just recover back up. So if you're trying to front run something, that would be key. 10-2s still has the potential double in place. That would end in the short term the bear steepener. Dollar index trying to break out. So I'm keeping a close eye on this. I'm keeping a close eye on this, especially with the Fed press conference, because little minor support now. You see here, shoot, wrong line. There we go. You see here how it was, you had some selling pressure in here repeatedly. All the selling pressure spiking above it a couple times. Finally, just barely closing above it yesterday and retesting it this morning and coming out above it. So if this level holds, I'll be watching for the breakout above. If we do break out above and the dollar index, because that could be sort of interesting for the next play in the dollar. But if we come up here with the harmonics, look at the minor level, 107.84. Look at the next major cluster, 62.5 and 108.78 with the 25% projection. So really pay attention to this if it does break out to the upside. Even if you don't trade it, I'd pay attention to it. Crude bouncing back. I'm waiting for the EIA numbers. It's broke down below my key levels yesterday, so I'll be watching unless it can get a close above 85.50. I'm watching for another rollover in the short term only. Remember, there's let's see if they're bluffing if it gets down to 79, if they're going to try to refill the SPR. Natty gas, we do have a little potential double top here. So it went up, retested yesterday, the high area turning down. So I'm going to be paying attention to that because we could get a backfill. But if this level holds and does not trigger, then I'm watching for the next breakout higher. This is a case, though. You see where the first target is. This is a case because of a gap fill right in front of it, and this has been a stronger market that my first target would be the gap fill before. And if I was looking to short something, that would be my stop reduction instead of the first target. And this is lower probability. More so, I'd be watching for buy areas along here because natty gas has been trying to form higher bases. So we had the lower base, the medium base, and now it's trying to form a higher base with the upturning moving averages, especially going into a seasonal upward shift. Gold still technically have the double that's still in play, but a long way of triggering. So it's just waiting on a bigger time frame after the big run up, still a sideways correction. Silver. Do we have a double in silver, as was asked? Yes, you do. That is a valid double in silver. All right, 22.56 on a closing basis, on a daily closing basis. Silver has not been able to get much traction in a double forming against the simple 200. So that's where that sits. What else do we have? Hello, Christoph. A flip 4. Okay, thank you, Sashi. What's your emergency stop on the pound US dollar? We'll get to that in a second. Emergency stop on the pound US dollar 4-hour double bottom. Let me just take a look now. The yen cruising towards the bonds, the JGBs cruising towards that 100 basis point mark, and the yen pausing. This is a real interesting area, so I'm keeping an eye on that. If it breaks through this 152 euro, by the way, is coming down. The euro stop is 105.20 on the closing basis, or 104.96 on the lower probability channel. It turned into channeling and never hit the first target. Now the pound, the mini 4-hour double, the stop right now is if we close on the 4-hour basis below 121.18, or we trade through 121.02 technically. but you could just make it 121. If you trade at any point below 121.02, the double is invalidated after hitting the first target. If it snaps back and the dollar rolls over, and then it still closes below 121.18, it's invalidated. If it holds above that going into a close and does not hit 121.02, it's still in play. But it's looking like it's going to. Cycles got to the bottom, and it could not get any traction. The daily cycles look to be rolling over early, and it could not get above the rotation zone. All right, spiders against the daily rotation zone. Same thoughts as are with the futures. Next key targets, though, on the spiders of 420, 421.60, and then 423.67. On the shorter term basis, the pullbacks, we're going to gap higher now today. So the first thing would be to yesterday's closing price at 418.24, and then I'd be using the harmonics. I just don't know where those are going to be yet. So roughly, I'm just going to guess right around, let's say we rally up a bit here. The first level would be then about 417, then 415.70, then about 414.35, but that's not exact. You're going to have to put those on your chart, especially if we start rolling over into the open. Overall, same thoughts. We'll be watching again as the even if we roll over for a more substantial bottoming formation in here. The Qs, which never triggered the double yesterday, just coming down, finding that key support, never triggering it, and now climbing higher. The Q is going to gap up also. So with the Qs, the first key target would be to the close, 350.87. My target area to upside is 353.30, and watching that on a closing basis. If we close above there, I'd actually target just in front of this 87.5, 357.72. I'd use about 357. And then the next target would be to the gap fill to 359. But remember, we're going into the rotation zone and a major breakdown zone. Same thing, you're going to have to update these levels going into, if we make a high going into the open, you're going to have to roughly move it there. I'm just going to roughly 352 to see where the key support would be. We're looking at it right about 348.25, then major 347.25, then 346.03. But that's going to have to be updated because we don't have the open yet. How do I know there's going to be a gap up? Because I see the pre-market price right here. This 351.79 right here. And yesterday's close was 351 or 350.87. So I know there's going to be a gap going with 3 minutes to go. Something sudden would have to happen with 3 minutes to go for it to roll over. So that's how I know. Tesla, there's no more little mini double after, the next thing. If it does continue to rally, your key resistance is coming in about 210. Your major resistance is coming now in at 210 for the first key level. Still, the double's still in play to the downside, so I'll be watching for rollover plays in there. NVIDIA trying to hang on to major support, but watching for the rollover play in there. SWK, daily double bottom. Looks completely valid to me. Looks completely valid. Against some pretty decent support area. There's nothing wrong with it to me. Do not ignore, though, do not especially ignore the first target. The only negative for this is it's still below its 200, so you might get some reactions there, but do not ignore that breakdown zone. You are welcome, Eric. That's where we sit. Just let's peek back at the S&P going into the open. Still holding up. I'm seeing if there's any key resistance. We're reacting. Keep an eye on about 42.25. Going in the open, we spiked up 42.25 to 42.27. Watch that going in open for potential reversals, especially if the tick rolls over. And then my really key area, if we chop back and forth, is 41.95 to 4200 now going into, if we chop back and forth going into the Fed meeting. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Remember, non-farm payrolls tomorrow, but and Apple. But the most important thing is the Fed meeting, and more important than that is the press conference. Talk to everyone later. Bye for now.